All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to see such a crowd here after 3 days of bitterly cold in Colorado. So it's great to see good showing here. And hello, everyone in Zoom land. Hope you're comfortably on your couches or desks, enjoying a hot chocolate and nice coffee, and that you didn't have to brave the icy roads, the icy highways of Colorado, because you're in for a good show to hear about a forgotten highway that none of us took to get here, but we'll find out in a moment. But to get started on this very first lecture of 2024 of the Rocky Mountain Map Society, Naomi Heiser is going to come here and tell us about what's going to happen, at least in the first few months of the year. We have a good show, and then she's going to introduce our speakers. So Naomi, great to see you here.
Can everyone hear? Is the mic working okay now? Good. Well, welcome. The upcoming programs I wanted to tell you about is that we just locked in a new program for February 27th, and it's going to be Rebecca Theobald, who's a professor of geography at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and she's going to talk about the research she does with redistricting maps, which seems to be a pretty germane topic since we're in 2024 now. Then in March, we're going to have our own board member, Don McGurk. I'm not sure of the date yet or the topic, but we will hear about that, and you'll hear about it in the newsletter very shortly. In April, there'll be a break because MAP month in May will be another huge, wonderful endeavor of 4 weeks of different lectures on persuasive maps. Did you want to talk about that at all yet, or should we hang on? Hang on. Okay, we'll get back to you on the speakers for that too. So moving on, tonight we're going to hear about a deep dive into the research about the Cherokee Trail that includes exciting historical finds, dusty local archives, and the creation of new mapping from a wide variety of sources. Larry Obermesik, a devoted Colorado history buff and map enthusiast, has found his calling in preserving the state's heritage. He did this starting in 2019, so this has been a rather long journey for him. He unearthed a collection of Gold Rush journals that had never been published before, and that got him started on research on the Cherokee Trail in southern Colorado's ancient network of Indian trails and pre-territorial claim clubs in that region. Claim clubs are an interesting concept. I don't think we've covered them here before, and it was new to me, so I hope you enjoy hearing about that too. I really enjoyed learning from Larry when he came to visit my library and talk to me about this research. His discoveries are really amazing, and his enthusiasm is infectious. So I hope you enjoy this.
When I first heard of the Cherokee Trail, I had a good friend of mine who loved reading romance novels. Don't understand why, but that's what she did. And one day she had this at a table, and I said, "That's amazing." And she said, "What?" "The name, the Cherokee Trail." Said, if you wanted to make something sound mysterious and dangerous and don't go on the Cherokee Trail, you'd use that name. It's a fabulous name, but it's fake. And she said, well, what do you mean it's fake? It's about Virginia Dale. It's a stagecoach stop on the Cherokee Trail. I said, no, it can't be real. And she said, why? Well, because I never heard of it. This is just an amazing name. There'd be like 100 movies made about this thing if it was real, right? They made movies about the stupidest things, the Western movies, right? You know, you could pick one topic and they made like 100 movies about one topic. So I said, okay, well, let's test my theory, my half-baked theory. And so we went to the movie database, which is a nice little resource for amateur researchers. Because like I said, if you want to find out if something's ever been written about or made a movie made about, this is a great resource. Well, you notice that the very top item on the list was the rendition from the book that my friend was reading. It's a novel. It's not a historical account. It's not about the Cherokee Trail per se. It's about the stagecoach stop. We happen to have, I think we have an expert in the room about Virginia Dale, and hopefully someday they'll be able to talk about that stuff. But if you notice the next two items, there were only 4 movies that showed up in my search. The next 2 items, they actually had the words Cherokee Trail in the title. But if you notice the very first line, it says the Cherokee Strip. It wasn't about the Cherokee Trail at all. It was about the Cherokee Strip, but I've never heard of the Cherokee Strip. So of course, I'm inquisitive. I had to look. Well, the Cherokee Strip was the northern piece of Oklahoma that abutted the Texas Panhandle. And bad guys, bandits, would cross the border into the panhandle of Texas, and they would rob ranches and loot places, and then they would scurry back across the border into lawless, Cherokee Strip. Well, the Texas Rangers couldn't follow them over the border. So that was what the movies were all about. And if you think back, back in the days, you saw movies about this. You maybe didn't realize that's what it was about, but that's what it was. So this really confirmed my half-baked theory that this really wasn't real at all. So until 2019, I literally thought the Cherokee Trail was fake. No kidding. Well, in 2019, as I was researching the history of Southern Colorado, I stumbled across an amazing collection of gold rush journals in the Library of Congress archive that had never been published before, never transcribed, and literally a handful of people had ever opened the book and read them. And I was enthralled. It was just amazing, amazing. Well, the gentleman who wrote the journals, his name was Daniel Jenks. Daniel was an unknown prospector from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Daniel spent, 15 years writing in his voluminous collection of journals. I spent the last 3 years trying to chronicle his odyssey, digest his books, and be able to put myself in a position where I could share the story with you today. So when I found out that Daniel Jenks came to Colorado in 1859 with his cousins on the Cherokee Trail, my whole theory was blown up. So the Cherokee Trail was absolutely real. Daniel Jenks proved it to us in his journals. The Cherokee Trail actually ran all the way from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, through the northern part of Oklahoma to the Santa Fe Trail, over Pueblo, up the Front Range, and then you see it broke into 2 legs, and it went over to Fort Bridger. That was the complete Cherokee Trail. As you see, it's just too much to talk about in a 90-minute presentation. You see what I did there, Naomi? Yeah. And so we have to take a focus on a piece of the trail, and that is what we've done. This is my area of interest, and it is basically from Pueblo to Denver. My particular personal area of interest between Pueblo and Colorado Springs, and the reason is because there's still mystery there. There are crazy, cool, important historical things that have never been tracked down there because it wasn't the sexy part of Colorado. There was no gold there in the mountains, right? There's no gold in them hills down where I'm at. All that was up here. And so most of the focus and the research has been done in this area of Colorado and not where I'm at down there. And here's a brief overview of the presentation. And just so you know, I made this presentation in Keynote on Apple. And when it got imported into PowerPoint, it did these added extra carriage returns and stuff. It didn't look anything like this on my computer, just so you know. The first topic we'll talk about is Glenn Scott's amazing USGS Trails Investigation Project. Fabulous stuff. The Cherokee Trail's backstory real briefly. And then we're going to take the trip on the Cherokee Trail from Bent's Old Fort to Denver. We're going to make 9 stops along the way, but a couple of them are just drive-by. So it's going to be a rather efficient trip. After that, if I didn't get the hook by then, we're going to go to the pre-territorial claim clubs and talk to you about an amazing discovery that just recently occurred. Totally historic stuff. On our trip, these are the 9 stops that we're going to make. We're going to stop in at Bent's Old Fort, where we're going to kind of kick off the trip. And then 12 miles east of Pueblo, there was an almost mythical leg of the Cherokee Trail that's never been memorialized ever. Then 15 miles north of Pueblo, we're going to stop at a place called Independence Camp. Independence Camp was a long lost, forgotten gold rush campground that had a personal direct connection to Julia Holmes, the first American woman to climb Pikes Peak. And again, Independence Camp has never been memorialized. 15 miles above Independence Camp, we'll make a quick stop at Fountain and show you something really cool that I found. Then just north of there, we're going to stop at the Blue Stem Prairie open space. This is Colorado Springs' open space that's just north of Fountain and east of Colorado Springs. This is where my friends from Okta and I are currently doing a Cherokee Trail mapping project, and I'm going to give you a little insight, show you how that works, what we're doing. From there, we're going to historic Jimmy Camp, which could be a presentation all by itself. And then from there, we're going to make a quick drive-by at Point of Rocks, stop at historic Russellville, and then we're going to end up here in Denver. Well, first we start with Glenn Scott. If you haven't seen Glenn Scott's research. You have to get a copy of this. It has just an amazing assortment of historical data. Basically, what they did is in the 1970s, the USGS kicked off a program that was led by a gentleman named Glenn Scott. And they basically, what they were trying to do is document all of the old trails before they were gone. And what they did was just phenomenal. So I'll share you a little bit of that tonight. This is one example of one of the things that Glenn Scott told us in his fantabulous Pueblos quadrangle map that he made. He told us that almost every major expedition that came through Colorado came through my neck of the woods in between Colorado Springs and Pueblo. But if you take all of the expedition reports that these expeditions created and summarize and paraphrase what they wrote about the territory between Pikes Peak and Pueblo, they wrote, we went from Pikes Peak to Pueblo. Not a lot of good content for me to work with. So, but the expedition reports did mention 3 consistent landmarks, obviously Pikes Peak, Fountain Creek, and a lodgepole trail. Well, today, the highway in southern Colorado, and on each one of the slides, I tried to give you points of reference. So Pueblo, Colorado Springs, so you know approximately where we're at. Today, the highway is on the west side of Fountain Creek. It's been that way since the 50s, probably. But back in the day, before Colorado became Colorado, all of the immigrant trails were on the east side of Fountain Creek. And if you notice, let's see if my pointer works here. Can everybody see the pointer? Can anybody see the pointer? We can't see the pointer. Okay. Okay, that's not what I wanted. But if you notice, the names are right next to the creek on the right-hand side, the east-hand side of Fountain Creek. And that was the ancient lodgepole trail that they kept talking about. And it was truly one of the most ancient roads in the United States, in North America. Some of the first people that ever walked on this terrain walked along Fountain Creek. It was truly an ancient road. If you ever read Contested Plains, if you haven't read that book and you're interested in Colorado history, you got to buy that book. It's an amazing collection of information. Glenn Scott, or Elliott West, called it perhaps the oldest path in North America along Fountain Creek. And then he called it North America's most ancient axis of movement. I trust him. But the trail had many names over the years. It was called the Old Indian Trail, the Taos to Fort Laramie Trail. It was called the Divide Trail, the War Road even, Trappers Trail. The Santa Fe Mountain Route is probably the one that most people remember. After 1849, that road became known as the Cherokee Trail. And I call it the greatest cutoff of them all. And here's a quick summary of the Cherokee Trail's backstory, just so we all get on the same page. In the 1820s, America was still a young country. The natives, the First Nations, they inhabited most of the continent still. The ancestral lands of the Cherokee, who were known as a peaceable tribe, well, covered modern-day Georgia and Alabama area approximately. In 1827, all the disparate factions of the Cherokee got together and they made an agreement, signed a constitution, and created the nation for the very first time. Imagine how precarious that is. You're in a nation, you're creating a nation while you're being enveloped by another nation. Think about that. Right? But they did, and they spent the next couple of years building their nation. Well, in 1829, the world turned upside down because gold was discovered in Georgia. And 1 year later, in 1830, the Indian Removal Act was signed. Everybody here knows what that was. I'd like to say, if anybody says government cannot move quickly, Exhibit A. Okay. It only took 1 year for them to pass the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears, of course. Most of the Cherokee were forcibly removed from their home, and they were sent to Oklahoma, and it's just a shameful part of our history. But if it hadn't happened this way, Colorado's story would have been different. In 1849, the California Gold Rush kicked off. Well, we have a group of Cherokee that are in Oklahoma that came from Georgia, and they already knew how to pan for gold. So as soon as the Cherokee saw that, they said, why not us? This is our opportunity to get rich. Right? Gave an idea. Let's create a shortcut. They knew about the lodgepole trail along Fountain Creek because of the famous expedition reports. And they said, we could put that together and create a shortcut. So first they had to make a trail, blaze a trail from Tahlequah to the Santa Fe Trail, which they would take over to west of Bent's Fort and then continue on up the route. But there was no trail there. They had to make it. And along the way, the newspaper, it was a big deal at the time. The Cherokee were going to California. So really, really smart white people heard about it. And they met up with them along the way because the Cherokee were an Eastern tribe. They didn't have beefs with the Western Indians. The Western nations didn't know, they had no conflicts with these people. So the white people said, hey, we could tag along. It's a smart strategic move. And they were right. It was. When they got together and had their big confab, there was one gentleman named Lewis Evans that impressed the people so much, they elected him as their leader. So that's why when you hear it talked about, you'll hear it referred to as the Evans Cherokee Party, because Mr. Evans was voted to lead the Cherokee and the rest of the company on their way over there, the way to California. Okay, right? We get to Bent's Old Fort along the Santa Fe Trail. That's where the old trail used to cut to the south and go to Santa Fe. Everything west of Bent's Old Fort at the time, only mountain men, trappers, traders, and the natives who lived there knew it. It was literally the American wilderness. One step west of Bent's Old Fort, you were officially in the wilderness. This is a map reference for you. The red X's denote the original surveys. I downloaded every general land office survey for this part of Colorado. And then every trail that was on the surveys, I marked it on the Glenn Scott's map with a red X. So we all had to have reference and perspective, okay? When the Cherokee came to Colorado in 1849, they followed the Arkansas River to Pueblo and then went north up the trail and then continued on. But when they came back on their second trip, the return trip in 1850, 12 miles east of Pueblo, Delaware guide told him, his name was Ben Simon. And Ben Simon told him, hey guys, there's a shortcut here. It's called the Chico Creek Cutoff. And he said, if we go this way, it goes north and then it takes us over to Fountain Creek and it's a really cool shortcut. And we end up 15 miles north of Pueblo on the Cherokee Trail. But unfortunately, one man said there was no sign of a road there. So he literally, Ben Simon, who was really an expert at navigating Colorado trails, he only convinced one party to follow him across the Cherokee Trail or Chico Creek Cutoff that day, and they were from Arkansas. And so that's why every now and then you'll hear it called the Arkansas Immigrant Trail as well. The Chico Creek Cutoff, even though it was an actual road, if you look at this 1890s, 1889 map, I don't remember the exact year, but right at Chico, and I wish I had my pointer, but right at Chico, you notice it went north and it ran into the Fountain Creek at number 1864. See it up there, 18? It was a real road back in the 1800s. In the late 1800s, this is a well-used trail. It was actually on maps. But today, that trail is almost invisible. I live right near there, and I have spent a lot of time trying to identify the exact route that this trail took. And it's really, really difficult. So one of the issues that we have to deal with is in southern Colorado, in our part of Colorado, all of the USGS's LiDAR is low resolution. So it's like 3 meters, so 10 foot. So each dot that comes from the plane literally makes a 10 foot. You can't see any detail with 10 foot. Up north, as you'll see in a few minutes, we have high res LiDAR. And it's just night and day. It's like turning the lights on in a dark room. So but we've been politicking with our friends from Okta and anybody who listened to us. We really need to get upgraded LiDAR in southern Colorado because there's mysteries here that are just waiting to be solved. And if we had the technology, we wouldn't even need to be on the ground to prove the point that I'm trying to make. Well, the Chico Creek Cutoff, this is again Glenn Scott's map. The Chico Creek Cutoff ended 15 miles north of Pueblo at a place called Independence Camp. Very few people have ever heard of Independence Camp. Glenn Scott put it on his map because he wanted us to remember this place. This is the very first time, 1975, that Independence Camp had ever been on a map since 1859. Wes? Agree? First time ever since 1859. And the reason that he put it on the map is because he understood a little bit of the backstory. And here's what happened. At the beginning of the Colorado Gold Rush, the vanguard of gold seekers that came here we were called the Lawrence and the Russell Party. Lawrence Party had Julia Holmes, first American woman to climb Pikes Peak. They also had William Parsons, the author of the famous Pikes Peak Gold Rush guidebook with them. The Russell Party, of course, they have famous people with them too, but they found the first gold. And these are the two parties that really, when they joined together up here in Denver, they created Colorado's first towns, literally. So they're everything the Lawrence Party and the Russell Party did, every place they named was truly historic stuff. So in 1858, on July 4th, Independence Day, the Lawrence Party showed up at what they called a beautiful grove of cottonwoods, which does not exist today, but we know it was there then. And to celebrate the Independence Day holiday, they took the afternoon off, and like all good patriotic Americans, they drank the rest of their whiskey. That's what they did. Well, Independence Camp was created, named by famous people, right? These are like seriously famous people. But for some reason, it got lost in the historical shuffle. And when I discovered Independence Camp a couple of years ago, it was one of those jump out of your seat moments. It's like, how could Julia Holmes, the Lawrence Party, and William Parsons have something this interesting, and it's not on another map for over 125 years? That's crazy. So Independence Camp is one of the, it's just a phenomenally important historical place in Colorado history. And one of these days, I want to help memorialize the trail, or the campsite, I'm sorry. Only a couple people ever wrote about Independence Camp. Thankfully, one of those people was Daniel Jenks, the gentleman whose journals I found. And it was like somebody climbing out of history and grabbing you by the shirt and saying, look at me, I'm important. And that's exactly what it was. So the four maps that Independence Camp was on, we have a list of them if anybody's interested. Okay. So last year, my friends at the Oregon-California Trails Association, in 2022, I was able to share the Independence Camp story with them. And in 2023, they sent their volunteer videographer, Richard Hunt, down here, and we literally created the very first story or video about Independence Camp. Now, this part of the trail, remember, Independence Camp was 15 miles north of Pueblo. The next stop is Fountain, Colorado, which is 30 miles north of Pueblo. This is the area I live in. And there's all kinds of interesting history here. We start off at Independence Camp. If you wanted to follow along the parallel, for example, if you wanted to experience the Cherokee Trail, you would follow today's Overton Road in Pueblo, Meridian Road. And then when it gets to Hanover Road, you see the sign that says Evans Cherokee Party stopped here. So we know the Cherokee stopped there. And then the Russell Party stopped there, and the Teepee Buttes sign, the label that I have, Teepee Buttes. And so there's an anomalous amount of data here that says for some reason, people stopped at this place for some reason. Well, this is today is called Hannah and Frost Ranches. And this is what they stopped for. The Lake Cretaceous Submarine Springs of El Paso and Pueblo County. And let's see, Luke Tierney from the Russell Party, he actually stopped and left us a note and gave us an eloquent explanation. And he called it resembling the ancient edifices of Greece and Rome. So we know the Cherokee stopped, we know the Russell Party stopped, we know the Lawrence Party went past this place. And then we know one other thing our research has uncovered is that this is also the place where the long lost El Paso stagecoach route stopped. And the reason I know this is because I'm told that Wes Brown was the one who preserved this document for Denver Public Library, and my friend Nancy Prince found it, and that was another jump out of your chair moment. So interesting stuff. So 7 miles further up the road, we end up in Fountain, Colorado. This is my friends at the Fountain Valley Historical Society and Museum. If you don't belong, you should join them. And during my public records deep dive, I found something truly amazing. I mean, it appears to be truly historic. And let's see. Well, unfortunately, I'm not getting the, see if I can do this here. There we go. I'm having a little problem with the notes here. Let me read it for you real quick. This is amazing stuff. It says, Colorado City, June 13th, 1860. The Junction City Company claims within the jurisdiction of the El Paso Claim Club 320 acres of land for the purpose of a town site lying and being situated at the junction of the roads. Come on. There we go. So at the junction of the roads leading from Colorado City to Fountain City, and the road from Denver City to Fountain City via the Cherry Creek and Jimmy Camp route. This is the important part. Said site was taken February 1858 and cabin built thence to secure it. Well, as far as I knew, the earliest land claim in Colorado was 1858 September in Denver. And we have this record that hasn't been seen in a long time that says there was actually a land claim in Fountain months before the Denver claim, which is totally curious stuff. You don't think of it, Fountain. So basically, the historic crossroad that they described in the Junction City land claim would later become Fountain, Colorado. And there you see the three roads. Back in the gold rush days, before this place got developed, all roads led to Fountain, Colorado. Isn't that wild? You know, and I bet you if you go to Fountain, Colorado and ask people about it right now, they probably never heard of this. Okay. But it's a confluence of a number of different research angles coming together to give us this. So it's not that anybody has been negligent and doesn't understand. But these three trails converging at this spot, we have a couple other historical references of people that mention things going on at that spot that made no sense whatsoever to me until I saw why there was stuff going on that spot. It's a strategic crossroads of the trails that has never been memorialized as well. I think we're up to like 3 or 4 non-memorialized places already. So come on. All right, from Fountain north, we're going from Fountain to Bluestem. Well, most of you never heard of Bluestem, but Bluestem Prairie Open Space is owned by the city of Colorado Springs. And if you notice, my X's, right, of where the Cherokee Trail is confirmed to have been, they end. The whole thing is developed, right? Only till you get to Bluestem, this is literally the first place from the Arkansas River where you can see the Cherokee Trail, where an average person, a visitor, could go walk on the trail and see the trail, learn about the trail. But besides that, all the way to the Arkansas River, it's like almost gone. So super important that now we do what we can to protect it and preserve what's left of the trail. This is my friends at the Oregon-California Trails Association. These are the people that have spent decades quietly working behind the scenes. They have teams of trail investigators all over the Western United States. And they go out and they document the trails, they locate the trails, and then they try to educate people about the trails. So very cool stuff, what they do. Well, in 2023, Bluestem, the city of Colorado Springs gave OCTA permission to map the Cherokee Trail through the Bluestem for the very first time. Nobody's ever done it before. Well, OCTA invited me to lead a new team that they wanted to start up in Southern Colorado. And of course, I said yes. So this is the first project that our team did. We call it the Cherokee Trail South team. First project we did was to map the Cherokee Trail through Bluestem. I'm hoping to have a little bit of room here. I wanted to show you something here, if I could. All right. Notice this is the actual open space trail, okay, that people can walk on. And this is the Cherokee Trail, 2 lanes of the Cherokee. So people cross the Cherokee Trail on this trail and then cross it. And then the Cherokee Trail ran along the reservoir. So this whole visitors trail parallels the Cherokee Trail. It's the only place that I've found in this whole part of Colorado where a person could actually experience the trail. So it's a golden opportunity for us at OCTA to put up signage and educate people. They're not just going to come and walk on the trail. They're going to learn about the trail and the history, and that most of them would never know about if they didn't walk on the trail and read the signs. So that's one of our goals in the coming years, is to be able to put good signage up there. Well, in order to map the trail, we have a new team, and we needed to learn how to map the trail properly. And so OCTA gave us assigned a team of what I call trail masters. That's my term, not theirs, but I like that. I think it sounds cool. But they showed up and they've jumped in, they told us how to collect the data, organize the data, submit the data. And then what they do is they take all the data that's collected in the field, they produce a report, and the report is submitted to the National Park Service. Well, the National Park Service is the arbiter of what's historic. And once the National Park Service says, yes, that trail that you mapped was historic, it'll be added to the list of historic trails. So that's the ultimate goal. And the whole project has been a crazy learning experience. It's been wonderful. It's wild. So what an adventure. So the first thing you do if you want to do a site mapping is you do a preliminary analysis. So we go through the site using all the resources, using Google Earth Maps, Topo, and we're looking for everything. We're looking for any single thing on that property that's worthy of inspection. So we go through all the structures, the trails, the section markers, the crossings, everything. Anything that is potentially interesting gets logged. Then we flip. If this is the LiDAR version of the same exact thing I just showed you. Well, Bluestem, for a long time, decades and decades, it was a huge cattle ranch. And so on the ground, most of the stuff is invisible. You really, because of the cattle. But once you got high res LiDAR, look at the clarity, right? I mean, it actually says, here was the trail. And we can actually see that the trail broke into a number of different forks. And one of those forks actually went right underneath the reservoir. See? Okay, that's right. So that was one of the trails. It came here as 2 trails, and then two went that way, and the third one went that way, and literally went underneath. And then when it got to this point, you can see there's almost nothing here, because that's where the cattle were. And so when you get a little north of that, you see all of a sudden we see these branches, right, that are running off here. And so all of these are potential Cherokee Trail segments that we want to map and classify. And so that's what we do. You go through and you ground truth, they call it. You take the theories and all the research that you did, and you actually put your boots on the ground. And you go look at that spot. And if it is a trail segment, they classify it. Okta created it's a 1 to 6. It's a scale of 1 to 6 as far as grading or classifying a trail. 1, for example, is original. 2 is a trail that is original, but it's been driven on by modern vehicles. And then it goes all the way up to 6, which is a trail that was actually reconstructed. It's not the original trail, but it was made to resemble the trail, for example. The next stop north of Bluestem is Jimmy Camp, historic Jimmy Camp. But I want to point out to you, look at the route. Colorado Springs Airport. This is the east side of Colorado Springs. The airport was built right over the Cherokee Trail. The runway is on the trail. So of course, there's not much that could be done there, right? So now we're focusing on the Jimmy Camp portion, which is from I-94, I-24 in that section up there. Only very small portions of the trail in these areas that can still be mapped and preserved. Well, Jimmy Camp, wow. I'm really surprised how few people know about Jimmy Camp. This is truly one of Colorado's oldest places. The 1830s and 40s, you had mountain men, trappers, traders, and they stopped there, and it was a campsite. Coincidentally, this campsite is 30 miles north of Independence Camp, which was another campsite. So usually campsites in the gold rush days were 27 to 30 miles apart. And this was a truly historic place. Soon, the city of Colorado Springs is actually going to open it up, and the public's going to be able to visit the place. And just like Bluestem, we want to put signage up where the routes, where the people are going to be walking through, because there are still a few things in this site that have to be protected. They've got native artifacts, and the Corral Bluffs is just east of it, northeast, I guess. And it's truly one of, geologically speaking, I've been told it's one of the rarest, most important, significant places in North America. But most of us never heard of it, right? I'm sure there are geologists that have heard of it, but I never heard of it until this happened. So they're going to open up the Jimmy Camps. Come on. They're going to open it up soon. We're hoping this year to be able to, next year, maybe this year, next year, to be able to get out there and actually map the Jimmy Camp Trail, hopefully before it's open to the public. And from Jimmy Camp, the next stop is Point of the Rocks, which is an outcropping. But you'll notice that just north of Jimmy Camp, the Cherokee Trail split in 2 pieces, in 2 different trail routes. The middle of the screen is what we call Black Forest. Back then they called it the Pinery. The main trail went to the east side of the Pinery. And again, we're just east of Colorado Springs here and up to Point of the Rocks. But there's no real modern road that correlates to this. And so if you don't know that this is the trail, you would never know, because there's no road with signage, for example, to tell you where to go. Point of Rocks was gravity. It was like gravity. Everybody came to Point of Rocks. If you were here in the gold rush days, the place would have been peppered with campfires and wagon trains. The place was just jam-packed all the time with people. It was a hub of activity. Everybody came through this spot that was going on the Cherokee Trail. Fagan's grave is nearby. O'Fallon's grave as well. So from Point of Rocks to Russellville, again, you notice there's no comparable modern road. So it's not like down south where I'm at, the southern part of the trail, where you could actually ride a modern road and you're not on the trail, but you're paralleling the trail. You get the feel of what the trail was like. You can't do that up here. There are no corresponding roads. Now, that's actually awesome news. And the reason it's good news is because there's opportunities here for future trail mappers, future generations. It hasn't just been plowed over and bulldozed. This is literally people's backyards. So there's many opportunities in the future for future investigators to actually go through and to do some mapping of this place. I think it's really cool. Well, Russellville was one of those places, and one of the little known stories about the gold rush was newspapers lied. I know it's hard to believe, but the newspapers lied. They were touting these places, but most of it was just money. They were promoting, trying to get people to go to certain towns or certain trails. Well, this one, the Eastern newspaper said, called Russellville a prosperous town, and told everybody basically, if you go there, you can just bend over and pick up gold. And when you think about it, you think how many desperate people, right? The US economy literally collapsed in 1857. They called it the Panic of 1857. And there were all kinds of millions of desperate people in America. And when the newspaper started putting this kind of stuff, you can imagine the throngs of people that came here that were not prepared. And many, many of them died, unnamed. We'll never know how many, but we know that there were a lot that died. Well, last year, my friend Bob DeWitt, who runs the Pikes Peak Posse of Westerners, he had this amazing, he has the best roundups. Bob had a roundup at the Russell, right in the middle of Russellville. Well, for me, it was amazing because I've been reading about this place for years. And it's rare to find a gold rush site that looks the way it did back in the day. As you know, everything's been developed. Everything's been grown. If you can ignore the house and the concrete, this is how it looked. And the 1860s outbuildings are still on his property. And so I thought, that when Daniel Jenks literally walked through Russellville and he told us it wasn't a prosperous town, he said there were 10 log cabins, a sawmill, and 4 men there. That's what the newspapers were calling prosperous town. And of course, Daniel laughed. But for me, just being able to stand on the spot after all this research and to actually be in the same place that these people were, to me, was cathartic. It was just amazing for me. I'm crazy like that. I just love it. History come alive, right? Well, from Russellville, the trip gets easy after here because from Russellville, it follows 83. You cannot map the Cherokee Trail from Russellville to Denver. It's gone. It's obliterated. It's paved over. There is no work that can be done in this area. Right? We can put signage up, of course, but there's nothing else that can be done in this area. So this is the part of the Cherokee Trail tour where I'm going to change it up a little bit for you. I'm going to change the view, and I'm going to show you just a couple trail mapping secrets in Denver. The very first General Land Office survey that was completed in 1861. The bottom left-hand corner, you can see the South Platte. Here's Cherry Creek. And the main trails, ran on either side of this creek. You notice in the upper left-hand corner, we have Auraria, and Denver City. Denver's on the east bank of the creek, Cherry Creek, and Auraria is on the west bank of Cherry Creek. Well, this is where History Colorado is today. Well, if you notice, look at this. See the trail coming up from the southeast? Well, there's writing down here, but of course you can't read it because we got to zoom in. So it says the Old Cherokee Trail. This is what it looks like today. Cherokee Trail is white. It was literally, I'm being conservative, I said 3 blocks. It's technically 2, okay? But the Cherokee Trail ran within 2 blocks of the front door, 3 blocks from the front. There's a couple blocks from here, right? But it's not a big deal, and it really should be. I think it should be at least. Now, the question I get all the time at this point is, okay, Larry, so the Cherokee Trail was created by Cherokee, went past the History Colorado building, literally crossed the front yard of the Colorado Capitol, and very few people have ever heard of it. And that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, something that truly historic. But it's a perfect example of how in the modern times, we're so easily distracted and we forget things. It's only a couple generations, and we're even historic, truly historic things we've forgotten because it's all been paved over and it's just easy to forget these things. Well, we have work to do, okay? So why? Don't you know? Here's why. This is the reason. Because the Cherokee Trail Diaries are the seminal work that was produced by Dr. Jack Fletcher, his amazing wife, Pat Fletcher, and Lee Whiteley. Well, they didn't publish the work until 1999. And I mean, I don't know how many years, it had to be over a decade of research that these people put into this. Well, in 1999, if you talk to some historians, they say all of the overland trail information is found. All the interesting stories have been told, and that's what they think. But so in 1999, most of the history books were already written. This is the reason why you don't know about the Cherokee Trail, because it's not in your history books. So soon, we're hopefully going to change that. Well, last year, I had the opportunity, I'm sorry, we're 2022 now. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, and I just literally walked off the street. They didn't know me, you know, just very, very basic. And they were just incredibly gracious people, okay? They sat down for hours with me and dove into my research. And it was just heartwarming, okay? After all the research that I've done, to actually find experts who thought it was interesting too. That part's cool, okay? When you're a newbie researcher, you're looking for some kind of confirmation and validation of what you're doing. Well, Mr. Whiteley, I met Mr. Whiteley last year at Bob's Russellville outing. And he told me, he said, I shared my research with him, and he said, Larry, I'm a generalist. I leave the details up to people like you. I said, that's cool. What a compliment, right? That's awesome, right? So hang on a second. Without their incredible work, all the years and years and years that they spent researching this story, the Cherokee Trail story probably would have been lost to time. And even though it's so obvious and in our face, literally going right by History Colorado, how could we all forget it, right? So it's just a case study, if you will. Is like, there are, for the next generations, there are truly interesting things that are still waiting to be discovered. The stories have not all been told. So if experts tell you that, they're wrong, okay? And I'm going to show you in a couple minutes how we can prove that, right? Well, last year, come on. And again, the line's not mine. I didn't do that. Last year, my brother, I call him Cowboy Bob. He literally wore a cowboy hat for the very first time on the trip. So that's why I call him Cowboy Bob. We took a historic road trip, and we followed the Cherokee Trail from Bensold Fort to Fort Bridger. We recorded the whole thing in 360 HD GoPro on my Jeep. And one of these days, we'll make something cool out of that video. But you know, that's a long ride. The whole way, we didn't see one single Cherokee Trail sign, not one. It boggles my mind how, you know, something this important has been overlooked for so long. But now we have a chance to change all that. Well, Kansas, I'm told by experts, Kansas and Wyoming both have the Cherokee Trail on their tourism maps. Well, Colorado doesn't. Over the years, communities and businesses have been developed because of historic trails that went in front of their building, right? And we have this gigantic example of a historic memory that we could use as well, right? To promote the area, promote the history. It's a whole new thing. And I said, we'd take a ride on the Cherokee Trail to Denver, Colorado, right? So to me, the trail is more than just lines on a map, though. I'm interested in the people. I'm interested in the history of the place, not just that it was a line on a map and this is where the trail went. As you see, we've got a pretty good feel now for what parts of the trail are still available or we can still map, and what parts are just lost causes. And so for me now, it's quantified. We know exactly what we can sick, trail investigators on in the future, but I'm going in a different way over here. I'm trying to find out who the original settlers were. And finding pre-territorial information in Colorado, as you can imagine, is challenging. Well, that's what I've spent the last year doing, deep diving into Colorado's pre-territorial land claims and public records. So I asked my brilliant researcher friend, Nancy, how does a newbie researcher go about finding information that's pre-territorial, right? I mean, it's almost counterintuitive, right? It's pre-territorial. Of course, there's no information, Larry. What she said, well, we have to do a deep dive. We go to the county and we start looking at the oldest records because there may be a bleed over, right? We're looking at pre-territorial. Some people stayed here, right? The stories just bled over into the territorial times. Well, if you notice on the left-hand side, the tall book rack, that is the Pueblo Board of County Commissioners meeting minutes notes. They have never been scanned, photographed, or no, you can't read them, period. No pictures even have been taken of them, which just blows me away. And I think of all the stories. So the crazy fun part for us was we were looking at pre-territorial to territorial fold over, and that's all in book 1. Upper left-hand corner, you see the empty 2 spots? Well, some poor person at the county had to grab that heavy ladder that nobody's used in probably 20, 30 years, and they had to wheel it over there and climb up the dangerous ladder and pluck those 2 books out of the top. And we know nobody's looked at those books in a long, long time, right? A long time. So if in Glenn Scott's map, he also, I told you, he has such a wide variety of information for us. One of the things he told us about was claim clubs. Before Colorado became Colorado, in 1861 became a U.S. territory, but since 1858, people had been here trading land, buying land, claiming land. It happened, and they tracked the records in what they called claim clubs. Claim clubs were organizations that were created with a constitution. It was landowners in the specific, or claimants in a specific area. They had rules, they had dues. You couldn't just squat on a piece of land, you had to develop the land. The claim clubs also had what they called people's courts, and this is where they solved disputes between landowners. And Glenn told us that there was the major claim clubs in Colorado at the time. Arapahoe County Claim Club was Denver area, which of course the footprint was huge, Arapahoe County at the time. And the next one was the El Paso Claim Club, which covered the territory around Colorado City, modern day Colorado Springs. And then the third one was the Canyon City, Arkansas Valley Claim Club, which of course covered the Canyon City area. But he specifically told us Pueblo did not have a claim club. Well, that's where I wanted to start my research, in Pueblo, right? So Nancy and I went to Pueblo, and come on. And we did a deep dive. This is Pueblo's archive. This is the safe, one of the safes in the middle. And they have I'm told, I didn't count them, I'm told they have 1,500 old books like this. And the only books that have ever been photographed are the books that relate to land claims, land records. Nothing else has been scanned besides that. I'm told that, I called it the belly of the beast, and very few, I'm told by the people who work there, very few people have ever been able to go there and to see it. And it's like taking a trip back in time, right? Every page you turn is a story nobody's read before. Whether it's interesting or not is another issue, but there are a million stories in there that nobody's heard before. So come on. All right. So I said, we can only spend a few hours here. I mean, dusty old books. It's really a dirty environment. But again, it's exciting, and you don't really worry about it until a couple hours later. You say, okay, how much of this can we do? If you don't know exactly what you're looking for in those old records, it's almost impossible to find things. Luckily for us, we were looking at book 1. We knew approximately where it was at. We didn't know what it was, but we knew something was there in book 1. So I asked, have these things ever been transcribed or OCR'd, or is it any data associated with these books? I said, no. The books had literally were photographed. That's it. Pueblo has a crazy rich history, right? You know, I mean, it was one of the first places in Colorado. All the stories that have to be within these books are, you never know until you turn the page. So I said, you can't spend 6 months here looking through old dusty books. I want the pages. I want to see the scans. I want to take them home, be able to read them and digest them myself. So I bought the first 100 pages of Pueblo County's oldest public records. And I did what I call data mining. Basically go through the document, every name, every date, every place, every piece of data that somebody would search for, I collect it. I don't worry about all the legal stuff, the party of the first part, party of the second part. And sometimes we have claims and transactions that are literally 3 lines long. And then we have similar transactions that are 3 pages long because somebody hired a lawyer, right? And the lawyer got paid to write the pages. So I bought the first 100 pages, data mined the pages, and then I created this. And I call it Pueblo's first 100 pages. And it is the very first time ever that I know of. And again, if anybody knows anything I say is not correct, please speak up. Let me know afterwards. The 1860 to 1863 Pueblo's records are now simply searchable in a spreadsheet. If you were going to try to do the same thing in person, you'd spend decades in that building looking through the books. Now it's literally seconds. If you're interested in somebody or some early historical figure from Pueblo, simple keyword search and you can find the information, any information that's contained in their records. So subsequent to this, after I finished the first iteration, it was just so cool. I mean, everything, there's just so much interesting information in here that, again, nobody's ever digested. So I expanded it out to 1867. So now we have all Pueblo's oldest public records from 1860 to 1867, digitally data mined. So next I went to the Canyon City Claim Club records. Well, please, thank you, Fremont County. It's the first place that I found that has any of these records actually online and convenient to get to. I believe theirs are only indexed to the name, grantor, grantee, person, buyer, seller, the date of the transaction, just some basic data, but not the whole thing isn't searchable, but the basic, the most important components of it are. And so I did the same thing. I bought the first 100 pages of the Arkansas Valley Claim Club, Canyon City, and I data mined them. And so that now gave us 2, Pueblo and Canyon City, all of their oldest records. So next stop, and this is where things got really interesting, it was El Paso. Well, George Anderson, a gentleman, wrote about the claim clubs in the 1930s. And George, in his writing, George talked about how he was kind of blown away that even though he was only a generation or 2 away from the claim clubs and the actual gold rush, that nobody wrote about it. He said there were very few instances of people even mentioning them, let alone doing deep dives and understanding the research and the data behind them. And so almost 100 years later, I'm standing here, a total newbie, and I'm wondering why nobody's wrote about it since George, right? So George is opining about why nobody wrote about it before him, and then here I am doing the same exact thing almost 100 years later. Well, George transcribed what he called the El Paso Claim Club record book. My friend Nancy found a link on the Pikes Peak Genealogical Society's website that I believe goes to the Pikes Peak Library District, correct? Right? Just want to make sure everybody gets credit. Well, this is the typed intro page from the El Paso Claim Club record book transcription that was done in the 1930s by Mr. George Anderson. And as you see, George said the original book is in the office of the county clerk and recorder. It is accessible, but not in good condition. Well, I data mined the transcript, but I want the original documents. I want to see now I've got, Pueblo, I've got Canyon City. I want to see the originals. I've got all originals now. I'm developing a nice collection of these original copies. And so I went to the El Paso, the El Paso County Recorder's office, and I walked in the door and I asked the really nice ladies at the help desk, said, I'm looking for the El Paso Claim Club record book. I'd like to buy page scans and I'd like to publish them in a book. And they looked at me like I was from Mars. Okay. And they said, well, we've never heard of a claim club. We don't have that record book. And I said, George Anderson said you do. In the 1930s, he wrote in a book, you guys have this. They rolled their eyes, of course, which, you know, these are public employees. They got people walking in off the street crazy sometimes, right? They don't know who I am. And I said, but George is really adamant. George said, you have this book. And they said, we don't have the book. And so they escalated my request to management. Well, there was just a partition here next to me as I'm talking to the ladies. I know they heard me, right? Now, probably everybody's rolling their eyes. And, oh, we got another crazy one, right? So this wonderful lady came out and she was a data specialist. And again, I know she heard me. I explained it again. Looking for the El Paso Claim Club record book. All I want to do is buy some page scans. She said, we have never heard of the Claim Club. If the book is not in our catalog, we do not have that book. But we have a warehouse. And if you would like me to, I'd be happy to ask them to keep an eye out for the book that doesn't exist. And I said, of course, of course. I said, can I please leave you my phone number? She said, sure. So I left the place and I was really disappointed. I spent years of research. And you know, now you got the bait in front of you, right? I want to read the book. I want to see the book. But I got there and to the culmination of the story, and it was, there isn't a book. There is no book. So I left there totally disappointed, got in my car, and I got ready to pull out of the parking lot. I was going to go get a sub and lick my wounds. And my cell phone rang, and it was an unknown Colorado Springs phone number. I don't normally pick them up, but this time I did. And guess what? It was a recorder's office. They found the book. No kidding. This is the original El Paso Claim Club record book. I could find no instances of a photograph ever being made of this book, ever. Not of the cover, not of the pages, nothing. Again, if anybody knows where those images are and I haven't found them yet, please share them with me. So again, I can change that line in the presentation. Right? But because I had already data mined the book, if it was the real book, I knew how to certify that. I was actually one of the few people in the world that could certify it based on what I had done, the research I had done. Open up my notebook. One of the anomalies in the data is that the very first record is on page 47. 47? Why in the world would the first record be on page? You're wasting 46 pages. Why? Well, when you think of logical reasons, they were going to add a table of contents. Maybe there was another book, and they were going to transpose the information from one book to the other. I can't think of many other logical reasons why you would open a book that's chronological, create a book, and start on page 47. So if anybody's got any other insight that I haven't thought of, well, please share. So I asked, can I open the book? And she said, sure. And when I opened the book, you know what was inside that book? A folded up copy of George Anderson's Colorado Magazine article explaining the historicity of that book. But it wasn't sticking out, as you can see. So as now, I'm not saying that people were, didn't see something obvious or anything like that. If you didn't open that book and literally look at that book, you would have never known what that book was. So I opened it up, went to page 47. There's the first record. My computer, I went to the spreadsheet, reverse sorted, showed her page 47, very first record. Well, let's go to the last record. Boom, here's the last page. Last record matches the spreadsheet. This is the original book George Anderson was writing about in 1933, I believe. It's 33, 34, so in that time frame. So of course I'm blown away, right? You're actually seeing history. I was just disappointed 10 minutes ago. I thought it was a failure and the whole thing was just a dream of mine that wasn't real. And here we are holding this in my hands. This is real. This book was real. Well, the pages had never been scanned. I took the first picture of the cover. So of course I asked the obvious question, 2 questions. Where did you find the book? The obvious question. And the answer was, we found it in a box of old miscellaneous stuff. Fabulous. Can I scan the book? I said, I have a non-invasive book scanner. I can bring it right to your office, scan it right here in your office. I want to get original copies of this. Somehow I want to get copies. But it's such a sensitive book. The binding is all torn, and you want to be really, really careful with it. You don't want to put it on a flatbed scanner. I don't want to cause any more damage than that book has already had. I'm even offering to wear white gloves. Okay, that's the kind of moment we're at here. And of course, they said it wasn't necessary. So I was very careful with it. And she said, yes, you can scan that book. So a week later, I went back, and for the very first time, I scanned the El Paso Claim Club record book. These images, these pages have never been imaged before. The data has been transcribed by George Anderson. And so we know the content of those pages, but nobody's ever seen the actual pages themselves that I know of. So when I was done scanning the very first book, truly historic stuff, is it not? Interesting, or is it just me? I think it's interesting stuff. Well, when I finished scanning the first book, I said, could I please look at that miscellaneous box? I have to look at the miscellaneous box. And they said, sure, Larry. They were so awesome. And before I go on, public employees, they get such a bad rap, right? The people at Pueblo, at the clerk's office, the people at El Paso, they're wonderful. All right. They thought they didn't have the book, and they told me they didn't have the book, but nobody was rude. It was nothing like that. They really tried to help me. So I just think it needs to be said that these people need to get their props. Right. So that's the box, the miscellaneous box. And of course, I started going through the box, and then I found this. Another El Paso Claim Club record book, the other half of the El Paso records. Not only has never been imaged, I don't think it's been seen by anybody in modern times, period. If George Anderson knew that book existed, we would already know about it. He would have transcribed that book. He would have at least made a mention of the book, because it's truly historic stuff. But as you see, that book's in a new binding. So what happened was, in my theory, is that before George transcribed the first book that he told us was in bad condition, and it was exactly in the condition he said it was, somebody rebound this book because the binding was all torn up and the pages were loose. And so they thought they were doing the right thing by protecting the book, but they're missing 10 pages. And so there are literally 10 pages out of the 331 pages in this book that have never been seen before. The other half of El Paso County's pre-territorial records, right there. So, of course, can I scan that book too? Of course. And of course, they let me. But now we literally started the day with a transcribed version of George Anderson's 1933 of a book. Never been photographed, never been scanned. There were never any images. Both of these books had never been imaged before. So they're literally, and no exaggeration, they're the crown jewels of El Paso County's public records, and hardly anybody knows about them. They should be in a museum. They shouldn't be in a miscellaneous box. Everybody should know what they are. And so I spent the last couple months, and I data mined that book. So now I understood. There was a totally confusing thing, though. The first book, they called Book A. The second book, they called it Book A. Why would you do this, right? So I call the first one Book A1, and this one A2, okay, right? But I said 331 pages of history, Colorado history, never been seen by anybody in modern times. Just trying to work through this interface here, guys. Okay, so now I have all the pre-territorial records, the oldest public records from Pueblo, Fremont County, and now from El Paso County. And of course, I'm setting my sights to here. I'm coming north. And my goal is to create a comprehensive collection. My friend Nancy, and I've had other historians tell me the same thing, that when they started looking for information, this is like gravity. It's something you go to first, right? Just a quick check. Was that person mentioned, period, before you go deep diving any further. But right now you have to deep dive. You can literally spend months looking for something that does not exist. And it's an incredible waste of time. So I actually took I gave a very, very well-known historical place a copy of one of my spreadsheets, just to get their opinion, get their feedback on what they thought. And literally just about jumped out of their chair. The first email I got was, oh my God, I've spent hours looking at this. I cannot stop looking at this. This is amazing stuff. And that was just one county. So now again, we're growing this now, this population, this collection of things that other historians haven't seen before, and somehow we'll figure out a way to share that with people. Right? So this is why I'm doing this, because the trail, the Cherokee Trail, again, it was just a line on a map to most people. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand who lived there, who settled there, the stories behind the trail, because very few of the stories of the people that lived on the Cherokee Trail have ever been told. Right? So I use Dick Wooten. To me, Dick Wooten was like Ben Franklin. Right? Dick was everywhere. There was power. He was never elected president, but he was always at the heart of everything that happened. Well, we have to remember the context of the time now. We're in Denver. Dick's a rock star. The Civil War is getting ready to break out. It didn't happen overnight, right? These animosities and the fight and the anger and the bloodshed is slowly boiled, right? It was a boil until it finally exploded. Well, Dick was a Virginian. It didn't matter all the cool things Dick had done and how big a rock star Dick was in Denver. When the Civil War started heating up, it was just getting ready to explode. Dick Wooten fled Denver with a posse on his tail. Crazy. I mean, somebody as historic as Dick Wooten literally was going to be arrested, thrown in the hoosegow. Why? Because he was a Southerner. It was black and white, red and blue, north and south, and there wasn't any nuance. It didn't matter all the cool things Dick had ever done. He just happened to be from Virginia, and you need to get out of Denver. So what did he do? He came down on December 1860, 3 or 4 months before the Civil War broke out. He claimed 160 acres on Fountain Creek near my home. But they used the old meets and bounds system back then, from the rock to the tree to the stake in the ground to the creek. Well, of course, it was just ripe for abuse. You move the rock, you pull the stake, and now you jump a claim. And before I got into this research, I had no idea what claim jumpers were. I mean, a rough, vague idea. This is what it is, though. So Dick filed his original meets and bounds claim because Colorado wasn't a territory yet, and the GLO surveys hadn't been completed yet. So we had no PLSS data to work with. So Dick made a whole bunch of history. Well, in October of 1862, Colorado had become a territory. The GLO surveys had come here and started documenting this place. Dick did us an awesome favor. Dick went and refiled his Fountain Creek Cherokee Trail land claim with PLS data. Before the data mining project that I've done, which is what these individual records show, if you would have looked for this data manually, it would have taken you months. But the truth is, it was impossible to find it all because 2 of these records were in book A2. It had never been seen before. So nobody could possibly have found all of these things, all of these public record entries for Dick Wooten, because it was hidden. It was not known at the time. Right? So this is Dick Wooten's revised land claim on Fountain Creek on the Cherokee Trail. Well, beforehand, I wouldn't know to look for these little pieces of data. But in Dick's book, Dick actually gave us 2 more pieces of data that if you weren't a trail investigator, they would mean nothing to you. He told us that he built his ranch house on the high ground. And he also told us that when the 1864 floods happened, people remember the 64 floods up here in the northern part of Colorado, but you don't realize that the water went south. And Dick Wooten gave us the only firsthand account of the 1864 flood I've ever found. He said the water was 18 feet high and 1 mile wide, and it plowed every ranch and settler community in South Fountain Valley away. But he said that the creek actually changed course. The flood was so violent that the creek actually changed course. So now we have 2 more pieces of data. So I asked Trail Master Bruce Watson, who's been doing this stuff for a long time. So Bruce, here's the data that Dick Wooten gave us. So he went and he found the high ground, right, with topo, and then we zeroing it down. So this goes back to what I told you before, but this is all low-res LiDAR down here. We don't have good visuals from LiDAR, but I predict that the moment that we get good, high-quality, high-res LiDAR down in southern Colorado, we're going to be able to pinpoint Dick Wooten's ranch for the very first time in history. And Dick's Ranch also has never been memorialized. So you say, okay, Larry, that's great. That's Dick. What does it mean to me? Well, what it means is this is just one example of one person, but now we have what I call a collage, right? We have, before all you had was some newspaper accounts, a few things from public records or letters from families or immigrant journals or whatever, but it was just mismatched. It's little pieces. It's not a picture. It's just little fragments of a picture. But when you take all of the records, the public records, the old public records, that data, and add it to all the newspapers and all the other little things that we're looking at, we start to see more of a mosaic. And this is my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to create Southern Colorado's first pre-territorial land claim map of the settlers on the Cherokee Trail. The map can never be perfect because you cannot know exactly the footprint of some of these things. You just can't. And so it's a work in progress. It's something that I'm hoping that I will kick the ball down the hill and future generations will finish the project. So I'm doing my best to collect all of the data and do the hard work and blaze the trail through the tall grass like the Fletchers and Mr. Whiteley did for us, so that in the future, your future generations will be able to take the ball and advance it. But one of these days, my next goal is to come to Denver and create this map all the way from Pueblo up to Denver itself. Thank you for listening. Oh.
Anybody has questions here? One or two questions.
Is there a Arapahoe County claim book?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was asked from the audience, is there a Arapahoe County claim club book? Yes, sir, there is. It's on our radar now. We're heading this way. We know my friend Nancy, I know for sure because my friend Nancy was researching up here years ago and she saw it. And when I learned about the claim clubs and I started sharing the story with her, she's like, I saw this book. And I said, that's it. That's the claim club book. So wait, I'm pretty sure it's right across the street from us, right? Denver Public Library. We believe it's right across the street.
Any question online?
Yes. So from Sue Small, that was absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you know what years are covered in the El Paso Old Territorial Record unofficial book? My 3 times great grandmother had the El Paso House Central Hotel in Old Colorado City in approximately 1860, and I'd love to know.
So cool. Yeah, if she gives me her name, I'll be able to tell you. I'll be able to tell her in 10 seconds when I get my computer on. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you can. If she can give me a name, I'd be happy to look at it. That's amazing. Okay. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just want to say Larry's taken my name in vain quite a bit tonight, but his final goal, if I found out about the people that settled. My family went on the pre-territorial times. They settled in 1867, right on the El Paso Pueblo County line, and the stage stop and the railroad tracks that came on the east side actually were in my grandpa's land. So, you know, I've written about that. I like that story, and we found each other accidentally through what he had written and published and what I had written and published. So it's been fun.
Nancy's great-great-grandfather was, after the 1864 flood, the Jenks family left Fountain Valley along with a whole bunch of other people, Wooten as well. And her great-great-grandfather, a year later, came down to Fountain Valley looking for property. Well, all these places had been deserted because of the flood. And he literally, within a couple miles of Jenks Ranch, Independence Camp, the same exact neighborhood, her great-great-grandfather. And so when we met, it was like, no way, right? So her great-great-grandfather was the continuation of the story from the pre-territorial to the modern day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that.
Larry, that has been a tour de force investigative report and showing us this hidden highway. So really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. Thank you also, everybody online. Hope you enjoy. You set the bar really high for all talks of 2024. So really appreciate it. So thank you all. And we'll see you next time, next month. Thank you so much. Okay.